What's going on, everybody? So, just yesterday I posted a video, and the theme of the video was how I think if we're looking for places to expand our card collection, look no further than vintage football cards. I think they're really cool. They're really cool looking, and you can get some of the all-time great players at very surprisingly affordable prices. Some people in their feedback agreed with me. Some people in their feedback didn't, and that's okay. I welcome all opinions, always. My only request is that we just do it nicely. Well, one of the people who disagreed with me, strongly disagreed with me, was John Mangini. Now, he's got an awesome channel. I've been watching Mangini's channel, the Mangini Collection, since before I even started my own channel. I think he's got an amazing collection. I really like his humor. I think some of the things that he does and the way that he expresses himself is very entertaining, and I highly recommend that you check his channel out and subscribe to his channel if you haven't yet done that. Well, throughout the video response that he did, and that's what he did, is he did a video response, and he basically went through the reasons why he disagreed that vintage football cards were not really going to take off. Well, I thought it would be fun to do a rebuttal to his rebuttal, and especially being a fan of him and his channel. So here are my thoughts. I wanted to go through some of his main points and just give a quick rebuttal as to where I am. Now, a lot of what he said I agree with. I definitely agree with a lot of the points that he made. And then some of the points that he made, I don't know if I disagree or if I don't know how it necessarily applies. So I want to take a minute to go through a couple of those main points. Now, let me start by saying, let me be perfectly clear. I do not think football cards are going to replace baseball cards. I don't think football cards are going to surpass baseball cards. But I do think there's a lot of growth potential in football cards. And if you're looking for a place to expand your collection, I think it's a great place to look. So let's take a look at his first point and his first main disagreement, and then I'll come back and kind of give my response to that point.
Because of changes to the rules, older football players are being eliminated from the record books and are no longer relevant.
First point that he makes, I totally agree. I totally agree that football records from the old timers, they're not even on the front page of the record books anymore. You look at the top 10 passers of all time, and you're not going to see Johnny Unitas or Otto Graham or Sammy Baugh or any of those guys. You're not going to see them. And even receivers, he points out several times in the video that Don Hudson was like maybe the best receiver of all time, or certainly up there. And how I think every fifth catch that he had was a touchdown. The guy was unbelievable, but he's not going to be on the record books. So let me first address that. I think baseball has done a really good job of not changing. The records in baseball are sacred. When somebody breaks a record, people don't really celebrate it. They're kind of like bummed out. When you have something like, Roger Maris breaks Babe Ruth's single season record, that didn't go well for Roger Maris. People put a lot of pressure on him, and some people didn't like it. For similar reasons and different reasons, when Hank Aaron broke Babe Ruth's career home run record, that didn't go well for Hank Aaron, as he got a lot of hate. Now, I think some of that was racist hate, which is awful, but I think some of it was also the fact that he was passing Babe Ruth, who's this beloved person. So I do agree that a lot of the records with baseball, a lot of the old timers are still relevant. Ty Cobb is still very high on the all-time hit list. You look at a guy like Cy Young, his win record, career win record, will never be broken. Never. It will never, ever be broken. And part of the reason why is we protect pitchers so much. We have a 5-man rotation now. I mean, it wasn't that long ago that teams had a 4-man rotation. Back in those days, guys would pitch both games of a doubleheader. So yeah, you're going to have over 500 wins because you're pitching all the time because they're not worried about protecting your arm. So absolutely, a lot of the strikeout career numbers, win career numbers, ERA career numbers, because it was a different time that there wasn't the high-powered hitters up there. Also, I think other things have protected some of the records. For example, for a long time, we had the shift going on, which is a recent change, which made things difficult, especially on left-handers. You have better lighting, for night games, whereas, I know that it was day games back then, but the field condition, for example, these fields are pristine, which makes it easier for the defensive player to get the put out. You have things like bigger gloves. The gloves that they used in the early days looked closer to something you would use as like a gardening glove than a mitt like the outfielders have now, where they can go up over the wall and take back home runs. So a lot of the innovation and a lot of the protecting of players has specifically helped preserve the records. You look at a sport like basketball, and they've done things to advance offense. They've added the three-point line. They changed things like, man-to-man defense, and now zone is allowed. They have the arc under the hoop for taking a drive, right? An offensive foul. They have things like, just look at Wilt Chamberlain. One of the reasons Wilt Chamberlain could average 50 points and 25 rebounds in a game is because of the offensive goaltending. Some of the rules that have changed a lot of the rules that have changed in basketball have been specifically designed to make it more exciting, more offensive. Look at another sport like football. Like Mangini mentioned, you've got guys, you can't hardly touch the quarterback. You can't hardly touch a wide receiver. So of course it's become a passing game. Of course it's become a league of passing because they're protecting the franchise, the quarterback, and they're protecting the franchise players' stats, which are the wide receivers who they throw to. It is completely changed, and it completely increases the offense, but changes the fact that Johnny Unitas, who was one of the first big throwers, his records, those numbers are way been blown by because of the changes in the game toward offense. Steph Curry, it's easier for Steph Curry to be hitting a bunch of threes now that there's a three-point arc. It's easier for Steph Curry to be hitting a bunch of threes now that they don't require man-on-man defense. That has opened up offense. Baseball, however, has not really done anything to expand the offense. As a result, they haven't moved the fences in. If anything, Yankee Stadium, but a lot of the places out there, there's not been a lot that has transpired rule-wise to expand offense. And because baseball has been stagnant with their rules, which is a strength of baseball, one of the strengths of baseball is that they protect the integrity of the history of the game. I mean, just this year was the very first time we started seeing the pitch clock. We started seeing the number of pickoff attempts, the number of times a player could step out of the box, the change to the shift. It's the first time they really made some changes to the rules, like kind of ever. As a result, it has helped preserve the old time guys still being relevant in the record books. But there's a problem with that. The problem with the fact that baseball hasn't changed the rules is that baseball is no longer king in this country with sports. Now, I'm not here to hate on baseball. I love baseball. I love baseball. Baseball is really made for the radio. It's no wonder it took off during the radio era. Baseball is a great game. It is a terrific game, but I can tell you as a high school teacher, baseball is not everything anymore. Back in the 40s and 50s, if you were a good athlete, you played baseball. You didn't play basketball. You didn't play football. You played baseball. Now, I can tell you, I've taught at a high school for over 20 years. My students never ask me about the baseball game last night or the baseball season or the baseball players. I mean, Aaron Judge had a historic season last year, and I didn't have a single student even mention Aaron Judge. They always talk about football. Constantly. Multiple times a week, they're talking football with me. Multiple times a week, they're talking basketball with me. You look at the best athletes at my school, and they're on the basketball team. Some of the other really good athletes at my school, they're on the football team. And I'm not trying to be funny, but like genuinely, my baseball team has a hard time finding enough players to field the team. Now, I don't think my high school is what the entire country looks like, but I do think it's a microcosm of the fact that football's rule changing and basketball's rule changing has added to the excitement and allure and interest from young people. But it has also made it where young people are collecting those cards, which I'll talk more about in a second. So yes, I totally agree. I totally agree that baseball's rules have not really changed that much. And because they've not changed that much, it's made it where a lot of those records are still relevant. Absolutely true. But again, that's a problem because the lack of change in the sport and the lack of excitement in the sport by the result of not changing has prevented a lot of the younger generation from being as interested in the sport. Again, more on that part in a sec.
Football doesn't celebrate the past greats like baseball does. As a result, younger generations don't know who the old timers are.
Okay, so another good point. Baseball does do a great job of keeping their players relevant. And you look at the old time guys, I mean, you didn't see them around much. Like you wouldn't see Otto Graham out and about a lot. You wouldn't see, Bart Starr out and about a lot. Certainly not like you see Willie Mays or like you would see Ted Williams or you would see Ernie Banks. Those guys were always at the ballpark. They were always being celebrated. They're at the Hall of Fame. I totally agree. I think that's a terrific point. I think there's a couple of things to be said about that, though. Number one, football players, especially the old-time guys, the lack of equipment and protection, those guys got destroyed. A lot of those guys are no longer alive. And one of the reasons they're no longer alive is because they completely destroyed their bodies playing football because of the way the game is. Similar to some of the other sports. But baseball is a sport where it doesn't take quite the toll on your body, and you can have a long life after the fact. That's why you see a lot of the baseball players signing at card shows. You know, I remember growing up, I'd see Don Drysdale, I'd see Sandy Koufax, I'd see Hank Aaron, Mickey Mantle, Ted Williams, because those guys, their bodies were intact. But I don't fully agree that they're not celebrated. The one thing football's really good at is bringing back some of their old-time guys as broadcasters and as media personnel. I mean, growing up, Monday Night Football, right? You had Frank Gifford, who was a star in the early 50s, right? Now you turn on Sunday, you know, the pregame stuff, and you got Terry Bradshaw, you got Dan Marino, there's, you know, Steve Young is always out there. You got Troy Aikman doing telecasts, you got Tony Romo doing telecasts, you got, you know, Tom Brady's even signed a deal. So they do some of it, but I get the point, and I think that's a fair point, that they don't celebrate those guys as much. But quite frankly, I mean, I know a lot of the last few years of Jim Brown's life, he was in a wheelchair. I mean, the guy's body is just completely destroyed. I think it's a fair point. But I do think also, in addition to them doing a decent job with it at broadcasting, at least more recently, you know, the Super Bowl, other than the World Cup, is usually the biggest televised event in a year. And they tend to bring some of those old, like, Super Bowl MVPs out and show them on the screen. And a lot of them do go to Hall of Fame weekend. And, you know, they do things like they're doing the door knock for, you know, the NFL guys when they get the Hall of Fame call. And I think that there's some of that. But I think, to your point, with the old time guys, the old timers, I think the fact that they basically played without pads or helmets made it where they weren't really in a condition to do that. I mean, baseball has some broadcasters. You know, you got like the Bob Ukers, and you got the Ron Darlings, and you've got the Burt Blylevens, and there are some of them out there, but not like the massive stars like you see on TV every weekend with football. So I don't know if I 100% agree with that, but I do get your point, and I do think it's a fair point.
So here's my comment to Mangini about how I was going to do a little rebuttal video to his rebuttal video. And then he asked me to touch on a couple more things, like the integration of baseball and stuff.
So I think that's a good follow-up question. I think you make some good points there. I think the integration of everything was really important. We should have never had that problem, but we did have that problem, and then the sports did get integrated. And you're right that it wasn't as big of a deal when football was integrated before baseball. But we have to remember that at that time, it was all about baseball. I mean, baseball was everything. You watch those old clips, and people would wear suits to the games because it was a big deal to go to a baseball game. Football wasn't like that. So, you know, we didn't even have a Super Bowl yet. When football was integrated, there was no Super Bowl. It wasn't until quite a ways after that. So when the amount it was televised was not even comparable, when the interest from, you know, society was not even comparable, it wasn't as monumental of an event because it wasn't something that had the society's attention like baseball. So yeah, I mean, you make great points. There are a lot of things about football from 75 years ago, which That's when baseball got integrated, was 75 years ago, that people aren't aware of. I'm not even going to pretend like I knew all of the things you just listed in that question even. I'm not going to pretend like that. But again, we're talking about the future of collecting. And here's my take. Just look at YouTube. What are the biggest YouTube channels? You know, you've got Card Collector 2, you've got Mojo, you know, you've got Roth Cards, you've got, you know, a lot of these guys, these young guys, the future of the hobby. We're always talking about the future of hobby. Look at the future of the hobby. Look at those guys and their videos, which I know a lot of us watch from time to time. I watch them a lot. I think they're very entertaining. But they all are collecting football. I mean, if you asked Card Collector 2 about the top 10 baseball prospects, I don't think he would know who they were. He might know a couple of them. And one of them is about to get arrested. But he's all about football. He's all about basketball. Mojo, same. Roth Cards, same. Justin Gamble, same. All these guys. And there's a bunch of them. And you know that they're popular because they've got like 100,000 subscribers. And they rarely collect baseball cards. So my point is, I think you make some great points. You make the point that A, the records, these old guys are no longer on the record books. That's fairly true. Baseball has protected the integrity of the records. The other sports have pushed for viewership and offense. So their records are changing all the time. They're completely different eras. It's a completely different game. Baseball does a better job promoting their guys. I think that's true. I think they are. I think football's doing okay. I think they do some things. I think they keep some of their superstars relevant. I think Troy Aikman and Tony Romo in the broadcast booth do a great job. I think Terry Bradshaw's entertaining. I think Dan Marino does a great job. I think Steve Young does a great job. I think those guys do great jobs. But I think you're right. I think baseball guys, and again, I think part of it is because of the punishment to their bodies, they're more visible. We see them more. They're more active. They're more out and about, for sure. And I think none of that really matters if we're talking about the future of collecting. Well, I take that back. It matters some. But we have to keep in mind, and all of this is just my opinion. This is just my opinion. And you're welcome to tell me I'm wrong, and that's cool. But this is fun. I think that the thing that matters for the future of the hobby is what is the interest of the youth. And the interest of the youth, whether we like it or not, is football, then basketball, then baseball. That's the order of their interest. And if you look at what they're collecting right now, it goes football and then basketball and then baseball. And that's what they're collecting. And so what I think is, if we look forward a little bit of time, they're going to continue to start expanding their collecting. And I have a video coming up on this soon, and I don't want to get too much into this because I don't want to give away too much of what I'm going to have in that video. But when people get burned on Trey Lance cards, when people get burned on Mac Jones cards, because of the volatility of modern cards, and they've been collecting for a while and they want to expand, just like I wasn't collecting 50s and 60s cards and pre-war cards when I was 10, I expanded by going older and older and older. I think that's what the modern collector, the future of the hobby, is gonna do. They're gonna stick, I don't think they're gonna say, you know what, I'm done with football cards, I'm going vintage baseball. I think they're gonna expand their collecting by going older and older and older in what they collect, which is football and basketball. Will baseball stay relevant? Absolutely. There's something about baseball cards that will make baseball cards relevant for a very long time, in my opinion. But I think where there's a lot of growth, still, I'm not saying it's going to replace baseball. I'm just saying, I think it's got a lot of growth potential, is vintage football. Because all those tons and tons and tons of football collectors out there that don't want to stop collecting, they want to keep collecting. They're going to keep collecting, but they're going to get burned a few times on some modern prospects, are going to continue collecting, but they're going to go into the safety and the security of vintage. That's my take. I don't think football cards are going to ever overtake baseball cards, at least not in my lifetime. But I do think that the popularity of vintage football cards is on the rise, because the future of the hobby, they love football and they have roots in collecting football cards. So when they expand, they're going to expand to vintage football. That's my prediction, and I might be wrong, but that's just my take. Appreciate you watching. Hey, Mangini, I appreciate the response. Nothing but love. No anger from me. No beef. This is no beef. This is all fun. This is all love. I think your channel is great. I'm a big fan. I love your collection. I love you sharing. I appreciate you reaching out this way. And I know that my video was a long response, but that's just the way I am. I'm a teacher. I'm long-winded. That's just the way that it is. So thanks for watching. Appreciate it.